Hi, it's me, Chio. Welcome. If you're new here, I am Chio Zoe, the author of Memory of Stone series. I'm also a writing mentor at Write Mentor Sparks, and I am an author tuber. So we're going to get right into the topic of today. Today we will be discussing on word count guide for fiction. As with all the tips I share on this channel, this is not a hard and fast rule. This is simply a guide for your writing and publishing process because there are exceptions and information changes in the industry as time goes on. So if it's just a guideline, why is it important in the first place? There are many reasons why it's important, but the two major reasons are: one, industry standards, and two, reader expectations. Industry standards is the way publishers view a certain type of work should be, how many words this kind of work should have. The reader expectations is like over time, interest of different genres and things like that have changed. So readers have, the mentality of readers have also changed in what they expect to get. For certain books, they expect a quick read, while some things they expect to have a lot of time, just go over and over a lot of words to get the story. That's basically what it means, what readers expect, what the industry expects, and how you as an author, even if you have your own style and what you want to do, how you have to find the balance between what you want and what the people that you are writing for expect from you. Generally, I'm going to be talking about the standard international word count and how it also is seen here in Nigeria. The first is, let's say, the maximum word count internationally, and I'll put it at about 100,000 words. So if you're publishing a book, your book shouldn't exceed 100,000 words. Again, there are some books that do exceed it, and it's completely possible, but as a debut author, you shouldn't be writing any book that exceeds 100,000 words, especially if you're going through traditional publishing. But over here in Nigeria, I will put that maximum amount at about 80,000 words. So yes, it's smaller here in Nigeria, and I'll say the sweet spot for publishing in Nigeria is about 50,000 words. And I'm going to go into why this is different, why it's important, etc. So these are the different ways how the word count of books are affected. Number one is the cost of publishing. Publishing is an expensive business, and authors all over the world have the same problem of barely making money from their works. So people that usually make a lot of money or proper income as like a single source of income from their books are people whose names are like the big names published from the big publishing houses, things like that. But the way the cost of publishing is affected by the word count is the more words you have to write, the more pages you require for those words, and the more pages you require, the more paper and printing goes into your work, which just increases the cost of it. But in Nigeria, because of importation of paper and all of that, and the printing devices and all of that, it becomes more expensive to print in Nigeria. Even if you decide to print outside and ship it in, the cost of shipping is also ridiculously high for Nigerians. So automatically you'll be paying more for the same amount of words from people outside Nigeria. Therefore, to be able to match the price range of books, you have to write fewer words. The second thing is return on investment, which basically covers everything, but I'm separating it because it's more like, with the way the cost of publishing is and with the way the marketing works and the way books are priced, what publishers get is less. So the more expensive the process is and the less money you get from sales and the less books you sell, it will give you a smaller profit margin. So you have to cut down on the word count to be able to match that profit margin and the number of books that are actually available for sale. The next thing is the sales cost of books. There are different standards, what people expect all over the world of how much a book can cost. But if I'm talking about here in Nigeria, generally the standard amount that no one wants to exceed when buying a book is 4,000 naira. So with that limit of 4,000 naira and publishing being expensive, the profit you're getting is small. And if you can't sell more than 4,000 naira because people won't buy the book, then you have to take the cost from somewhere else. So at the end of the day, the smaller size books will sell the same cost as the big books, but the smaller books will get more profits from it. Even though there are some writers and are some books that deserve the more expensive prices and could get away with the more expensive prices, it's just for safety's sake, it's better to go for the smaller. That's why we have the 80,000 as our own maximum word count here. Then the last reason is storage space, and this applies to anywhere you are in. I think we have less storage spaces here in Nigeria because of we have fewer publishing houses and all of that. And of course, with the more words on a book, the more pages, etc., so the bigger the book is. So imagine having small books that take up less space versus big books that take up more space. And storage spaces aren't things that you just get for free. You have to pay to use the space. You pay per meter or per feet or per anything. There is a certain amount of money you have to pay. So if you are taking up more spaces for less books, it's going to be eaten into the cost. So I think this covers the importance of word count and why it's different with different locations, why Nigeria's word count is generally smaller than those of our fellow writers and publishers outside the country. So with our understanding of the maximum word count, I want to go into the different types of fiction and how each type of fiction and each genre of fiction has their own specific word count. And this is where reader expectation comes into play. So there are three basic types of fiction when it comes to sizes. We have the short stories, we have the novella, and we have the novels. For the short story, you want to write under 20,000 words. For novellas, you want to write between 20,000 and 40,000 words. And for novels, anything above 40,000 is considered a novel. And while anything above 40,000 is considered a novel, internationally, it's not really qualified until it reaches 50,000 minimum, because novels just tend to have more in the story, more details. So 50,000 minimum is what you should be looking at if you want to publish a proper sized novel. If you are familiar with Nigerian books, you will notice that a lot of Nigerian books are small. So Nigerians tend to actually publish short story compilations or novellas. We hardly see full-length novels in Nigeria. So there are 4 reasons I'm going to go into why Nigerians tend to publish novellas instead of novels. Number 1, as I addressed before, is the higher cost of publishing. Publishing in Nigeria is so expensive. The second reason I'll mention is style influence. And this is talking about how the greats before us, the Nigerian writers who are famous, the size of the books they publish. While they do have some really big ones, if you look back on your books, if you have books by some really famous Nigerian authors, you tend to see that the sizes were smaller. And a lot of them were either poetry or short story collections. So there was already just a style of writing shorter books that the writers that came after them just continued with. The third reason, which I'm combining 2 things in one because it's mostly speculation based on the people I've spoken to and just my experiences. And the third reason is laziness versus skill of writing. A lot of writers in Nigeria haven't bothered to develop their skills further. There are some stories that will do well with more detail thrown into it, and I don't mean detail as in going on and on explaining one scene. I mean sometimes there's more to a story than just what is written, but because we're used to seeing that, we've become lazy in our approach to writing. We don't tend to put in enough words and effort and research to create more for a story. But there's also the line of skewed writing. So yes, laziness versus skewed writing. It takes, while every kind of writing is hard in its own right, I, as someone who writes bigger books, would say there's a certain skill that it takes to capture a whole world into fewer words. And that is the kind of skill that we see all those bigger names pull off. So we want to emulate them, and people work on those skills and tend to learn how to write these shorter books that capture those stories. So yes, you have to learn which one you are. Are you a lazy writer? Do you just write shorter books because you don't have time or you don't want to put in enough effort to do more? Or are you really skilled at writing short stories, so you don't need to write bigger works. Then the final reason I would say is the restriction in genres. There are many genres out there, many subgenres, and a lot more if you go deeper and deeper into it. But we tend to have a specific area of interest. We focus so much on culture or the Nigerian experience and family experience. And these works aren't works that you need so much world building and all of that around, because this is information we all know. So all the writer has to focus on is the specific acts going on in the book and not explain to us how the world works. And books like that generally have smaller word counts. So that restricted genre focus on these topics that don't need so much going on around this, don't need so much explanation for the audience to understand what that world is about, don't need that many words, as I said. So those books tend to end up being novellas or a compilation of short stories of someone's experiences or things like that. And with this, my last point about genres, I want to go into what the word counts for different genres are, so that if you find yourself writing in any one, you would know what to expect out of your work. Bear in mind that the genre word count I'm giving you is based on what we find outside Nigeria, like places like America and the UK. These are the areas where more study of writing, publishing is done. So these are the standards we tend to use when setting word counts of different genres. The first genre, of course, it is the genre I write in. It's fantasy, or in this case, fantasy or sci-fi. And the word count for this genre is 90,000 to 120,000 words. As I said, you shouldn't be going over 100,000 as a debut writer, but because of fantasy and sci-fi, especially those that set in completely unexisting worlds, those ones tend to need a lot of world buildings. Take, for instance, Lord of the Rings. There's so much going on in the world that it takes a lot of time to build that environment, then to build the magic system, or if it's sci-fi, to explain the time period and the mechanics and science behind everything. There's just so much that goes into that you can't just use few words to explain it. So it is possible to get to 120,000 words. After that, nobody's accepting your work, basically. But you should focus on 100 and below. So yes, the word count is 90,000 to 120,000 for fantasy and sci-fi. The second genre is historical fiction. Historical fiction can also be any genre. It can also be fantasy, it can be romance, it can be many different types of genre, but historical fiction is basically a time period in the past, and it's also, and sometimes is situations that didn't necessarily exist. So there's also world building that goes into there. If you're taken out of a place that does exist and your target audience is people who know of this place, you might not need to go into that much detail explaining. That's why it's less than fantasy and sci-fi word counts. But generally, historical fiction, it has to do with the time period your story is set in, and because it's history, we don't live there, we don't know this world, some explanation has to go into the storytelling. So that is 80,000 to 100,000 words. The third is literary fiction, and it's a very broad fiction group. So the word count for this is 50,000 to 100,000 words. And why this particular genre is why the margin for word count is so wide is because of the context of it. There's so much you can do in literary fiction that the word count is influenced by what subject matter you're focusing on. Some subject matters are easy to cover, some take a lot more to cover, some influence so many more things within themselves. So depends on the topic you're covering under literary fiction. It can be anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 words. The next is mystery. The word count is 75,000 to 90,000. It's a fairly shorter genre to write, but how interesting you can make the mystery and characters can expand the story. How many characters are in that story that influence what's happening in the mystery can create different storylines that influence the story. but it's generally one of the shorter genres to write. So you have 75,000 to 90,000 words. Then we have romance, which is 50,000 to 90,000 words. Again, a wide margin, and that's because of the type of romance you are writing. If you are writing a very sweet, simple romance, 50,000 is way to go because there's not much going on besides the process of the romance. So you don't want to take your characters through the day in and day out of these people, because what we are here for is how their love and the romance around this is growing. But you can have longer romances where there are deeper topics that have been addressed in it, where you have heavy themes of, well, heavy themes, maybe divorce is involved, religion. There are different things that can influence why a romance story would need more work, why you need to spend more time on it. But if the topic is just the process of falling in love, you use less words because that is what the audience is there from, that's what they enjoy. Then we have thriller. Thriller and mystery sometimes fall within the same group, but thriller is a genre of its own, and in thriller we have 80,000 to 100,000 words. Then the last is general fiction. General fiction involves any other topic, any more realistic topic, I'd say, more day-to-day kind of fiction when the actual plot is more relatable. So that's general fiction, and for that we have 75,000 to 100,000 words. So this covers how genre influences word count. Now the last way word count is influenced is by age group. The three main groups for word count are middle grade, young adult, and adult. So what I talked about in the genre is typically the adult word count, because that is the standard, but with age we have differences. For middle grade we have ages of pre-teens and below, and the general word count for middle grade is 30,000 to 60,000 words. For young adult is kind of tricky because the reason why kids books and teen books are shorter is because of the assumption that kids have shorter attention span and read less. But a lot of kids read big books, a lot of kids read a lot and love reading. I, for one, I know I consume so many books and I've always loved big books, and the more I found big books, the happier I was. So young adults tend to actually be able to read quite the larger sizes of books. Still, it is fair to keep them shorter than the adult word count. So for young adults, I'm going to divide it into two groups. We have the contemporary and we have the fantasy. Contemporary is everything else that is expected about fantasy. It's fantasy, sci-fi, and everything under there. For YA contemporary, the word count is 60,000 to 80,000 words. Then we have the young adult fantasy, which is word count of 70,000 to 100,000 words. This is bigger than the contemporary because, again, fantasy requires so much world building, and kids, teens who are interested in fantasy books don't mind. In fact, they appreciate the extra words that go into creating that new world. That is why the genre is still big even for young adults. So with this, I've covered why word count is important and the different ways it is influenced both in and outside Nigeria. And my advice to you as a new writer, as a debut writer, especially if you want to go through traditional publishing, is to go online. Just a quick Google search can help you. Enter the names of any of the books you like. Stick to debut books by authors you like or authors writing in your genre. The debut books are what you should be looking at word counts for, because any writer who is famous, any writer who is famous tends to get extra wiggle room when publishing, because they already have an audience who likes their work, so they can afford to go as far as 160,000 words and it will still be bought and it will still be published, because it's a guarantee that these books will sell. But as a debut writer, as debut work, nobody is really sure how well your book does, no matter the predictions. So stick to the standards, stick to the word count of other debut books in your genre. Unfortunately, it is near impossible to find the word count of Nigerian books published in Nigeria. So I would say that no matter what you are writing, don't exceed 80,000 words. Maybe you could do 90,000. The only time you should try to do more is if you're doing fantasy, sci-fi, because those genres rely heavily on the world building. And if your world building is poor, then the story just doesn't carry the same way. There is a lot to be done about that, and a lot that will make the process harder, but it is worth writing a good story for when it comes to sci-fi and fantasy. But every other genre, your work can fall under the 80,000 or maybe the leeway of 90,000 words as a Nigerian writer. So that covers the video for today. If you've liked this video, if it's been informative or entertaining anyways, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Your subscription means a lot to the growth of my channel and to me. So yes, please do subscribe and share this video with as many people as you can. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.